And also, we would look at some of the published research and some of the issues that published research talks about. So allow me to share my screen. I trust you can see that. So the title of the session, Selecting Research Projects. Some of you, I anticipate, already have some ideas, and that's good. Maybe you will hear during the day opinions from other people and explore those issues in greater depth. And maybe you can pick up some partners who are interested in those areas. So I will go back to the call for papers. And if you don't have that, don't worry, it will be posted on the chat room very soon. It identifies some of the examples of issues that we are interested in, and here they are. Now notice that I typed them in different colors. Number 1 and number 2 sort of relate to each other, which involves sociological, philosophical analysis of the effect of the pandemic on higher education systems in particular countries or in the whole region. And related to that, critical analysis of policy developed at national or local university level to deal with the crisis. Comparative studies are probably useful and interesting to do in these in this type of research. Then we have another type of studies, which is the pedagogical responses, curriculum and pedagogical responses to the crisis in terms of the curriculum, teaching, learning, organization, and or delivery. And I'll talk about those in depth. Then we have issues of quality and equity in higher education as a result of the interruption of normal conduct of higher education. I will talk about that a little bit. And then we hope to get some papers that look at the future. What would the future look like? Now, I'm not going to talk very much about that. We have an idea of how we can recruit papers on that particular theme, but I will talk about a little bit about each of the other themes. So I'll talk a little bit about number 1 and 2 in details, number 3, and then I'll jump to number 4, talk about it a little bit generally, and then spend most of the time talking about number 3, because I think we anticipate that that will be probably the majority of the papers. But I would encourage you to think about the other types as well. Okay. Now, what kind of issues can we look at from sociological or critical analysis research? Now, this is type of research that may not be very familiar in the region. I traveled quite a bit in ASEAN countries, and I go to conferences, and I always look for sociological papers because that's my interest, and I don't see very much. And I take it it's not very common or familiar. The good thing about it is that it places higher education in a general context of policy and education and society itself. It may or may not be empirical in the sense that we think of empirical studies as interviews and questionnaires and observations and tests and collecting data and analyzing it. That type of research may not be, although it can be, but it may not necessarily be. It could be critical analysis, critical discourse analysis of discussions in the public and the media. It could be policies and so on. Now, my battery is running low for some reason. Excuse me for 1 second. It's not a matter of burnout, it's a matter of loose connection. I think I sorted that. So we may not be very familiar with that type of research, but it is very interesting. Let's take some examples. Suppose, we want to look at the debates in the newspapers about should we start classes, should we not start classes, what should higher education be, how do we teach, and so on and so forth. Or it could be documents, policy statements, directives from education authorities, and so on. And we can examine, what do they talk about? How are they addressing the problem? What are they not talking about? What are the silences? What are the assumptions? So that's a valid type of research and common in many contexts as well. We can look at the situation and issues in higher education before the pandemic, what are some of the problems, and how the pandemic affect them, and are they being addressed? I don't know, could be issues of quality, equity, access, examinations, assessment, whatever it is. Okay, critical discourse analysis before and after of policy in particular. But there are other types of problems. What is the effect of the pandemic on university enrollment? Are students still coming to university? Are they coming in larger numbers? What are they studying? What are the patterns in enrollment? What about the students who are already at universities? Did they go on with the studies and so on? So the effect of pandemic on teacher and student workloads. That's a very important topic. Now, we all hear that referred to in Facebook and all that kind of thing. Faculty and students are suffering. How can we document that? How can we study that in depth? How are they coping with it? What does it mean in terms of the curriculum and the teaching and the research that faculty are doing? And then the effect of the pandemic on their well-being. Again, we talk a lot about the pressure that people are and the panicking and the psychological trauma they are facing. How are they coping with it? How wide it is? Now, I've got literature on both of those in another context, not in the context of the pandemic. I'm quite happy to share it. I hope that some of you will consider these. Now, I'll move into number 3, I think it was, or 4, which is equality and equity issues. Now, I'm going to make this statement, and as an insider, outsider of the region, I lived here, as you know, for 7 years, and I formed an idea of the context and the problems in education and so on. And I always see a lot of inequalities in the region, and that is within countries and definitely between countries. Remember that we are talking about here the region, the ASEAN region. There are a lot of inequalities. And I want to make another controversial statement, if I may, and please disagree with it, that type of research is not as strong here as it is in other countries. Now, it is important for 2 reasons. It is important because those problems that we take for granted need dealing with, need examination, so that we can cater for a larger variety and diversity of students. We need to inform policy about that. But equally important, if we want research from ASEAN countries to be participatory, or researchers to be participating in international dialogues and publications and so on, there is a large amount of literature talking about equity and access qualities and so on. And there's not as much contribution from ASEAN countries in dialogue. So please disagree with me, and if you are interested in looking at those issues. Now, some example of possible topics: Critical analysis is how diversity was catered for in the design of the interventions at policy or implementation levels. Now, I don't know in other countries, but here in the Philippines, most schools and universities went to diversity using online teaching on one hand, modules, whatever, and then printed matter that they gave to the students. Well, that's okay, maybe a solution to a problem for students who do not have access. But what do we know about the quality and the equality of opportunities in those? How did we cater in for higher order thinking, discussions and debates and all of that kind of thing? Teachers' feedback. What do we know about comparing the different modes that we have? And what are the needs of certain group of students? Are they catered for? Now, in the West, and I'll talk about that a little bit, there are a lot of research looking at gender differences in studying online. They look at high order thinking skills. They talk about other minorities, not only in terms of achievement, but also in terms of participation. So there is some research internationally on that. I think it is important to look at how varieties of students have experienced the interruption the average student. I'll come back to that point a few times in my talk. What are participation patterns observed with different types of students? How was it observed in the new modes? What learning opportunities were catered for by different types of students and modes of delivery? So there are a lot of research questions that we can ask. And I urge all of us, whatever topic that we take, to raise the question about the diversity in whatever we are studying. So this is not an area by itself. I think every research topic can be sensitive to the differences in student population, whether it is regional, whether it is ethnic, whether it is language, whether it is poverty and access to technology. Let that be a variable in
Bill,
all of our. Yes.
there's one participant who wants to be acknowledged. Randell, are you raising your hand? Randell Estacio. Randall, you can unmute and speak. Okay. Maybe.
All right.
Sorry, good.
Okay. Now, I want to go to the main type of research that we may be interested in, which is pedagogical, curriculum, teaching and learning, and achievement, and issues like this. And I want to very quickly talk about four things. One of them, I want to look at the literature that talks in general whether flexible delivery / online teaching is effective for students' achievement. There's been a lot of studies done on that. And I want to argue, this is my own argument, that that type of research is not very useful for us to do in the current situation. You will hear the argument and feel free to disagree with that. So I will examine what do we know about the effectiveness in terms of student learning of online teaching. Then I will talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty of online or flexible delivery research. What's in it does research say is effective? And I want to argue that that type of research is more useful. And then I will talk, I don't know if I have much time to talk about this, just very, very quick overview of about maybe 10 studies that I found in the literature dealing with that, just to give you an idea of the type of research that is done. I'm not going to talk about action research because I'm not going to have time to do that. Okay. I trust it is okay, and I'll continue talking unless people interrupt me. Now, is flexible teaching, in particular online teaching, is it effective? Now, what I want to do, I want to talk about 5 meta-studies that has been done across the years, whether it was effective, and I want to point out some of the problems with those studies. Now, the first meta-study, wide review of literature in different universities, was the OECD report in 2005. Now, it's very old. It's about 15 years old. So many of the findings may not be relevant today. But what they did, they surveyed 19 universities in 13 countries, and they surveyed vice chancellors, the deans of education, blah, 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 a wide range of people in those universities. And it was questionnaire. And they wanted to know that has e-learning been effective in changing pedagogy? Now, I said this is old, but the discourse of flexible learning and e-learning and so on has been around for at least 10 years by that time. And many universities around the world claimed, oh, well, we're doing something very different. This is education for the future. And e-learning is the way to go and so on. And they're using it for publicity and so on. So the OECD said, okay, well, let's find evidence. Now, the vast majority of the universities said, yeah, it was great. It changed teacher and practice and all that kind of thing. And then the surveys asked for evidence. What is the research? How do we know it has changed the way we teach and students' achievement? None of the universities were able to provide that. So the report concluded that e-learning has not really done anything to change education in a big way. Okay. Now you say 2005, well, okay, that's old, let's move in history. 10 years after that, there was another study by Shakshar, I'm not sure how you say it, and Human, and they found something completely different. They found that all the studies that they researched, e-learning or online teaching, there's a lot of difficulty and confusion about language here, has led to great achievement over face-to-face. A lot of benefits. Every single study showed that there are some differences. Now, the interesting thing is that the conclusion, they said, well, that residential-based model, the face-to-face model, will disappear. Now, this is 10 years ago. They predicted or argued for complete move away from the face-to-face teaching. Now, I said, let's not be too hasty. Let's examine the evidence since then in some detail. That's a problem. That's a problem with holistic studies that compare face-to-face, let's say, with traditional modes. First of all, we don't know what the new modes are, how they are implemented. We use the same language, online or flexible or hybrid and so on, but nobody knows really what we're talking about. They tend to be holistic, okay? And we may generalize the wrong results from them, as the next 2 studies show. Now, watch the date. That's 2010. Now, exactly the same year, there was another study that asks different types of questions. First of all, they said the alternative to face-to-face is not unified. We can have completely online, we can have mixed, and we can have the traditional face-to-face. And again, it was a meta-study reviewing many, many studies. Now, they found something interesting. Two things that are interesting. That if there is any benefit, it did not come from completely online. It came from hybrid results. So that's an interesting thing. And also they found that the withdrawal rate in the online teaching was very high. So even though if we want to believe the results of the previous study, I'm not saying to doubt them, but that's the danger of taking one variable at a time, even though online teaching and flexible and mixed modes may produce better results, but more students are dropping out. So are we better off? I don't know. Okay, that's a decision that research cannot answer directly. But then, to me, that's a very important next finding is that low income and underprepared students, including many minorities and so on, did not do very well. So averages can hide variety. So I think that's important here. Now, jumping 3 years in advance, okay. Well, this study confirms the mixed mode, but they realized or they commented that the majority of research that looked at effectiveness, overall effectiveness of online teaching, was very poorly controlled. Terms were not defined very well. We don't know how to use it, and so on. But then the last one, to me, is very important. They found that many of those studies look at declarative knowledge, knowledge of facts, recall of facts, definitions, and possibly very simple applications. The procedural knowledge, how to use that problem to solve significant problems and high order thinking skill and so on, those studies did not look at. So while we say, yes, there is improved in achievement, I want to know achievement of what? What did we consider to be the most valuable to look at achievement? Now, this study, again, it was a meta-study that says the traditional classroom instruction is not really defined. So here we are comparing online, flexible, whatever you want to call it, with traditional. What is traditional? It's not very clear. Now, their main comment that I think is very valuable as well is, okay, even if we accept online teaching improves teaching, we don't know what in it that improves teaching, what principles, what practices. If two researchers use flexible delivery and all that kind of thing, are they doing the same thing? So that whole area of research they're arguing is of limited use. In addition to the findings of the other studies in terms of the type of students, the type of knowledge that we are generating, they're saying that is not helping us because we don't know how to develop and improve the experience of students and the learning of students from flexible delivery. The moral of the story. Remember, I argued before, or I promise you I will argue, that this type of research that look at students' achievement is not very useful for us. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot do it, doesn't mean that you cannot publish it. But I'm arguing, that's my personal view, of course supported by what other people have said. It is not very useful. First of all, we don't have the luxury to compare flexible online with, let's say, traditional. We cannot have face-to-face. What we probably can do is compare the achievement from students who participate in online teaching versus the students who just took the printed modules. Maybe that's interesting, although the results are predictable in a sense that the face-to-face students would have access to the modules and the interactions. So obviously one would expect that they would learn a little bit better. But in terms of comparing online teaching or flexible delivery with the traditional, we don't have that. We cannot do that. And one group experiments for experimental design is not very useful. One group can be very good for action research type of studies, but they don't really look at achievement as the main thing. Now, the second thing is that effectiveness is far too general. What are we looking at? Performance on a test, high order thinking, communication, whatever. And I don't think it's a contemporary question in the research. The last point is it doesn't tell us how to do it better. It tells us, yes, we achieve some learning or not. It doesn't tell us what need to be changed. Now, in contrast to that, there are different, any questions, any contestation about that, please feel free to argue with me. This is my interpretation, but obviously I look at other literature to reach those conclusions. I could be biased. I don't know. I could be selective. If you like to contest that or question, please do so. Now, there are other type of studies that are, I think, more useful. Now, to introduce those studies, let's think a normal teacher, whether it's university, whether it's school, whatever, a normal teacher, what would they do that is effective? They explain the content very well, check on students' understanding, teach more, give resources, and that's fine. Now, we can do all of that easy, I think, online. We can have videos, we can have lectures, and I'm pretty sure all of us are very good in that. And I'm not going to talk about that, although there is room for research about that. But let me look at other things that teachers do that are also effective beyond explaining the content. Okay, we start the semester by talking about the expectations and how they should study and about the assessment and what we're trying to achieve. Okay, we forewarn the students about what is coming. We motivate them. And I'm not talking here about, playing those warm-up exercises, although they have a role. But we motivate them why they need to learn this, and if they are lazy one class, what's happening with you, and so on and so. We manage personal concerns. I don't know about you. Many students come to me with difficulties about family, about work, about finances, and all that kind of thing. Now, I'm not prepared to teach, to deal with any of that, but I cannot close my eyes, and I always open myself to discuss, and then we deal with those as well. Give feedback. You're on the right track, but this needs explanation, and this is not very academic, and so on and so forth. We develop other skills as well. When I give assignments, I tell students how to do research. I don't assume they know how to locate, how to make judgments about the quality of research, how to write. Now, all of those have nothing to do with the content I'm teaching. But I do them, and I'm sure all of us do them in variety of ways. How to work in groups. If if the group has a lot of tension, you say you should try this and split them up and do something else. We don't only use group work, but we teach how to do group work. And then build up positive social atmosphere. And I think all of us do it very well. We create an atmosphere where students want to come to, want to study. And that's important as well. Now, it is easier, I'm not saying it is very easy to focus the courses on the content. But all of these are very important as well. And maybe they can be the subject of research as well. Now, what's happening? Right? Now, there are certain studies that look at scaffolding. Now, that can be in variety of ways. How do we support students at a distance? Not easy, not easy. But how can we build up or build in that facility, both in the modules, in the face-to-face, or any other thing? Education, as we know, it's not just a matter of here's the content. You know, we create those modules. Sometimes I wonder why we bother with the modules, because all that information is on the internet anyway. So why don't we say read this and do this? And that saves us a lot of time. And then concentrate on other things rather than rewriting what is already there. Scaffolding is very important for both students' achievement and enjoyment of the course. Now we know that long before the online environment and all that kind of thing. So one area of research could be on the scaffolding that students take. Feedback is another area of research that people have reviewed. And I took that from various authors rather than one author. Timely feedback, constructive, clear feedback. Now, feedback on online is very different to feedback face to face. Face to face, we see a problem and we give feedback, or sometimes we ask for an assignment and give feedback. That's okay as well. But feedback is more problematic, more difficult. How do you do the timely feedback? People send me questions on Sunday morning. Okay, they're more likely to do that in an online. What do you do with it? What policies you take? What policies that universities take? And how okay, how we manage the time, the interactions. Now there is a lot of research that shows any interaction, increase in any type of interaction leads to better learning and better enjoyment of those. It could be student to student interactions, student to teacher, student to content interactions, the variety of interactions. Now, I found in my classes that students talk a lot outside, much more than I planned, and that's great. That's wonderful. But what about students who do not have that opportunity? How do we build in the courses to increase student to student and and other types of interaction? Now, the problem with that is that we realize that the students are under a lot of pressure. They have a lot of more important concerns. Uh, some of them have to work overtime and search for work and all of that kind of thing, family traumas and so on. So the amount of interaction may be limited by that. And more important than just the amount of interaction is the quality of interaction. So how can we not increase the volume necessarily of interaction, but the quality of interaction? Especially if that interaction happens somewhere else on a different platform, how can we contribute to that? Now, there are other factors, announcements. I will make this available on the chat room if you want to look at those in some detail and look at some of the references. The authentic activities is very important. This is important both in face-to-face and on the flexible learning as well. I just will mention it here because of the time, but this is very important. The second one that I use both in face-to-face technology settings as well as online is the reflection. Reflection on what they've learned, reflection on what they studied. There are two related issues to reflection or types of research. One of them is a journal writing that we can look at, and it has a lot of limitations as well, but it is a productive area of research. And more recently, I've been doing some review of literature on storytelling, use of storytelling as an effective way as well. I've got some literature on that. I need to make it available. Okay. Now, how are we doing on time? We have 20 more minutes. Jovi, is that correct? Okay, comments.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Comments, questions. Now, I've got copies of all of those studies that I mentioned. I'm quite happy to make them available for people if they want. So far, so good. So I think the aim of this study is to just see the breadth of type of research that we can be involved in. Now, many of those points you would forget and all that kind of thing. So that's why I'm making this available for you. We will upload it very soon. Now, what I want to do very, very, very quickly is look at various actual studies that I was able to obtain from the internet. And I did not spend hours and hours, and I was not trying to be selective in terms of the studies that have been researched a lot or not, or whether they're good research or not. I didn't even read the papers. But I wanted that as give us an inspiration of the variety of topics that people are researching. Now, I have all of those that I will mention. I think there's probably maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 or 10 of them. I have them on Google Drive, G Drive. So if you want access to them, I'm very happy. Just send me through Facebook or email your Gmail address. Many of the universities have Gmail comparable email. I'm quite happy to give you access to those. It may be useful. What I want to do now is just read the title so that you get an idea of the types of research that people are doing around the world. Mentioning them here is not an indication they are good studies. I don't know. I have not read them. Okay. Now, there are 7 studies. 4 of them are the effect of specific components of flexible release. Sorry, there are 7 empirical studies. There are several other papers that are theoretical in nature, but 4 of them target specific components of flexible delivery, like feedback and discussion, reflection, and so on and so forth. One study refers to gender as such. 3 studies are general models how to develop flexible learning. And then there are 2 free books on action research. One of them is by Stephen Kemmis. To me, is the Bible of action research, but that's my personal view. Okay, so I will just mention the titles and just say one sentence about each. This study is about implementing effective online teaching practices, voices of exemplary faculty. Okay, the assumption there is that good, experienced, productive and whatever teachers may have something to teach us. So they did sort of case studies about some of the teachers, about how they went around doing it. And that's interesting type of research. So case studies of either programs or faculty members. Sorry. The other studies look at factors influencing faculty satisfaction with online teaching. So not only they asked faculty, are you satisfied with the training, with the product, blah, blah, blah. And they tried to find out what makes them satisfied. And this study, unlike, well, many of the others, it's a quantitative study. They develop an instrument, validate it, and then use it with faculty. All those studies are on the GTRA. This study, the role of faculty in teaching asynchronous undergraduate course, they focus on what teachers do in online, in asynchronous courses. What is their role? Now, these are to be problematized. We all know what teachers should do face-to-face. That's the assumption that we do. But what is the role of the teacher in asynchronous, in producing material? Is it like we're busy 2 weeks at the beginning and then 2 weeks at the end marking? What is happening in between? Face-to-face teaching to online teaching, pedagogical transition. This is an interesting study from memory where they looked at the movement from one mode to another. Is not simply, okay, I take this and translate it into that. There are times when teachers have to examine their assumptions, their philosophies, and we cannot be effective, just take the textbook and record the lecture and put it online. It doesn't work that way. That may be one of the pedagogies we use, but there are other things that are important, and how teachers pass through, or didn't pass through this transition. Peer observation, I know a friend of mine, well, actually a group I met at Iligan, looking at observation and feedback. Okay, this study uses action research where they developed an observation and feedback, peer feedback model, and now they want to modify it to be able to be used and online, and they do use action research to do that. Transforming online teaching practice, critical analysis of the literature on the roles and competencies of the teacher. Okay. Teaching, learning, and sharing, how today's higher education faculty uses social media. We may use Zoom, or we may use one of those data, what is it called, learning management system. But students use Facebook, at least in the Philippines. In Indonesia, they may use WhatsApp or some other things. How do they use them? Both socially, educationally, politically. What are the different uses of that? And I often said that sometimes Facebook develops habits that are very contrary to what we need in education. If you look at the interactions on Facebook, they're one line. Okay, one like you put a very important topic, and people just press like. You don't know whether they read it, whether they agree with it, whether they get an inspiration of it. And if you ask people opinion, they might write 1 or 2 lines. They assert what they say and what they believe, and they don't feel they have a duty to maybe explain it. And I'm not talking about just homepages. I'm even talking about pedagogical things. People don't write very much. And how can we break that? If we want students to interact in depth, how can we break that culture a little bit? So the use of social media is both positive and arguably can be negative as well. Analyzing feedback processes and online teaching and learning environment and explanatory study, okay, focusing on feedback. Cognitive and social help, given that's the support, scaffolding. Students don't only need cognitive scaffolding, they need also processes, how they study, and they need cognitive and social. Okay. Developing learning community, in online asynchronous college, the role of teaching presence. No, teaching presence is a contemporary concept in psychology and sociology as well. How do you make yourself present, not only by attending, physical presence, but contributing to the debate and so on. It's an interesting construct, contemporary construct, and sometimes learning those contemporary constructs such as identity, presence, agency are very important if we want to publish internationally. Interaction, cognitive engagement, analysis of 4 asynchronous online discussions. In discussions, what people are talking about, how are they talking, are they responding to each other, and how we can facilitate and improve that. Gender differences, another paper on gender differences, and quantitative in this case. Now, there are additional papers that are theoretical that I thought may be interesting. I don't know, maybe not. There are 3 of them, and there are 2 books on action research, all on the same folder. So if you want, you can have access to them. Now, I think that's the end. Now, you're not going to remember any of those. And that's okay. I'll pass this around, but maybe something I mentioned, you say, that's interesting. I'll think about it, I'll read about it, and so on. I've been to many conferences, where somebody mentions the word, a theory. That's how I discovered agency. That's how I discovered many of those concepts, even authors. And I would say, I wonder what that means. I go and Google, and even before Google, go to the library, read a little bit more, and then it proves to be a very useful construct of a good topic for research, and I follow it up as well. So I think I gave a very wide examples of type of research that we can do, and moving away from this focus on our students achieving. I think there are many more things that we can say. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, I will upload the two things. I will upload copy of my presentation if you want to use it. Check the references and so on. I will also upload the call for papers in case you don't receive it. And before we do that, Sir Jovi, do we have the result of this survey?
Yeah, Bill, I can show it right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 90% from the Philippines. Well, not surprising. We have some countries where we had people registered, and 10 from Indonesia.
Yeah.
Welcome, welcome. And that's
I guess we have also guests from Pakistan who just joined later after we had the poll
okay,
posted.
who is from Pakistan? Do you want to identify yourself, please?
Bill, there are a number of comments also.
Okay.
Would you like me to read?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay, from Nurwati Jaman.
Okay. Nurwati is from Indonesia. Yes, I'm Nurwati. Yes.
Yeah. We intend to explore about pedagogical response to the crisis in delivering curriculum. For example, before the pandemic, attendees through paper, but in this pandemic, my faculty built digital system to cope the attendees as well by using Moodle, including e-learning and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good good topic. If we look at the type of pedagogies that we use in face-to-face and the type of pedagogies we use here, some of the assumptions behind those pedagogies and how are they different, and some of the things we could have used but didn't use. I'm always interested in silences, things that we did not use because whatever it is. Let's keep in mind that a lot of times the medium we use is the message. The medium determines what we do. Now, it's an interaction, what we think is important, but also the medium adds a lot of limitations and enablers. Okay, that's a good project. In a minute, we'll identify those projects and see who else is interested in it. That is very good. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we have, okay, yes. Somebody's, okay. Next we have from Randel Estacio. Sir Bill, what is your view about the students who are having a hard time in the online study because not on the content and the mode of teaching, but the environment, family situation at home,
yeah, exactly.
parents, and so forth?
I mean, there are various types of studies to understand that. Now, all of us are familiar with it. I mean, we heard it mentioned, we can imagine it. But how do we know about the in-depth experiences of those students? And what do we know about how teachers or faculty or university have tried to deal with that, if at all? Now, I don't know about this situation, but I'm familiar with some activities in some universities to provide technology, gadgets, and maybe connectivity to the students. How much? How did they do it? How, you know, is probably interesting to do that. But can the lecturer contribute to solving that problem? The student comes to me face to face and says, look, you know, I cannot study because of the noise. And I try to suggest various things. Why don't you stay a little bit late here, go to the library, you know, find the time to study and so on. So how do we deal with some of those problems is another interesting subject of the research. And then pointing out to the responsibility of the system in terms of inequality. I think it's very wrong and misguided to expect faculty to solve all the problems of society. So what is the role of the university and the government and you know, in dealing with those? Again, very good problem for research.
Again, a comment from Abigail Simbre. We really have to explore different factors to improve distance learning, especially among elementary school students. It's a different experience compared to college and graduate students.
Absolutely.
Who can be on their own.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. And then from, yes.
Yeah, let me comment on that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, this session is general. Whoever wants to come in and listen and think of ideas, that's fine. The focus of the journal itself is on higher education. That doesn't mean the others are not important. It's just that as a special issues, we're focusing on higher education. But if people want to develop projects on other types of students and submit them somewhere else, we encourage that. And I'm personally happy to be critical friend to any project that than me. So that I just want to clarify this, that you are right, you are very right. Meta-analysis, is this most appropriate? No, I would not say most appropriate at all. And on okay, I'll read the question. Did you mention meta-analysis? Is this the most appropriate research method? On the contrary, well, I would not put it very high in my to do something meaningful about the effect of an intervention on achievement, you need two groups. And I don't think in many countries, I don't know the situation in Indonesia, but in the Philippines, at least this year, maybe next year will be different. It is not possible. There is no face-to-face. And compare this year's group with last year is not, an acceptable design of a study. Now, you can do that in terms of action research, where the concept of learning is not just achievement on a test. There's day-to-day learning and behavior and all that kind of thing. So it is possible to learn from one group a lot if we go beyond just performance on a test. And the last thing that I look at, if we look at effectiveness by itself, well, if we have one group, of course, students have to learn something from it. And if they did or didn't, I don't know what is it in my course, in my design, that led to learning. So it is far too holistic. So that's why I am arguing for other types of research that look at the nitty-gritty of the design and the context in which we use them, because I think we learn more, and this is supported by the literature. Do you want to say something more about that? Now, the fact that there are studies being done on that, now I don't want to be judgmental on other people, but that by itself doesn't mean it's a useful research. If we sometimes look, where is that research conducted? It is usually that research conducted in developing nations, educationally and research-wise, because they've read something about it in the 90s from other countries. Now, there are a lot of areas of research that are being done in developing countries because 10, 20 years ago, they were done in developed countries. Now, I don't want this to be misinterpreted. I'm not saying because it is done in, developing countries, it is not useful. I'm not saying that at all, or that it is not well done. No, some of it is very well done. But what I'm saying is, if we want to review of the literature, we need to look at a longer period of time and looking at the original research and ask ourselves, did that research lead to anything before we do it? Now, if you just want to take one example of research that is almostly non-existent, is the learning styles. And there have been a lot of questions debunking the concept of learning style. Now, I can show you some studies about learning style that they were published last year. Okay, so we need to look at that in a bigger context. Okay. You want to read Leah's contribution, Ching?
By Gladys.
Uh,
I don't know if I heard it right, why we cannot compare flexible learning instruction to the usual instruction in the lens of students' achievement. There are many studies sprouting today similar to that concern. Is that what I heard? By Mom Gladys Escarlos.
Okay. Yeah, I think I answered that. What about message from Leah, Ma'am Leah?
Yeah. Wait. Mom Fe Baronia wants to give her reaction.
Okay.
Or,
Go ahead.
Mom Fe, can you please unmute?
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Unmute, please. Sandali. Ano ba to? Participants.
The microphone is still muted.
Yes. Here. She has to unmute herself.
Yes, I don't think I can do it.
Yes, I am trying.
Yeah, I can ask to unmute.
You can. Okay.
But only ask her.
Mom, please unmute yourself. Ayan.
Okay. Sorry, there's still no sound. Is maybe try to unplug the headphones and talk if you can. We cannot hear you. Unplug. Unplug rather than just remove. Unplug it and talk through the computer. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Okay, we'll go to Leah's comment and then come back to you, Ma'am Faye. Okay, Ma'am Faye say, you can read it sorry. Ma'am Leah said, I like the idea of moving away from effectiveness and explore other contexts. I gave my students a questionnaire about their concerns, goals, hopes, wishes in this time. Most of them shared that they just want to continue their studies. This is not to drop out during this time, not much of content acquisition. I find myself revising my strategy and become more personal in the interactions. I started having message groups. They become more expressive in their experiences. Very minimal pen and paper. I now inclined to allow self-assessment. Well, that's great. That's great. So you're documenting your journey, your initial expectations, what the students reacted, and then some of the modifications that you have done. I think this is a great start for research. Now, out of those many issues, you have to find maybe something common, something most important in the changes. The experiences of faculty and students as they progress in the online is very important. I had an idea of a research, but I wasn't quick enough to do it, to take a group of teachers, a group of students, and follow them up the whole 3 months or whatever it is and see changes in their perceptions and so on. I think there's a lot to learn about how they develop their knowledge, what have they tried, how did they reflect, and so on and so forth. And also with students. Students the first week are so excited about it and so on, and maybe they become sick of it, and then they maybe find something else is interesting. That longitudinal study is very interesting. So I look forward to hear a little bit more about your experiences, Leah. Okay, I think our time is up. There will be discussion later out of fairness to Sir Jovi. Can we take 10 minutes break? My time here says about 10:30. Is that correct?
Right,
Yeah,
Bill, that's right.
it's 10. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so 10 minutes. We'll come back at 40.
Yeah.
10:40.
10:40. Okay,
Yes, yes.
recharge your coffee and come back. So Jovi, are you here? Ma'am Ching, I think we seem
Yes.
to have lost Jovi.
No,
I'm here, Bill.
because I made
Oh, you are
yeah,
here. Right,
there
right,
he
right.
is.
I got a
Yeah,
message here that I am the host now.
Yeah,
yeah.
because Ching called me, my Dr. Ching called me with my phone.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
okay. That's
So
okay.
before we start with our next presentation, I just would like to read the comment of Mary Jane Castilla. Uh, Thank you for sharing your great ideas on the possible areas of research that we can explore with the current mode of learning in these trying times. I see that we are faced with a lot of challenges, but there are also many opportunities to learn, unlearn, and relearn things. So thank you, Mary Jane, for that. And I hope it's okay with all the participants if before we start with the second talk, I will request you to please turn on your camera, show yourselves, so we can have a photo with all the participants. Will that be okay with you? Okay.
Lovely
So
to see your
please turn,
smiling faces.
yes, please turn your cameras. Turn your cameras, please. Marami pang hindi nagte-turn on. Nas, MJ, Christian, Neil, Dean
Don
Melfi.
Marwati.
Yeah. Hello. Okay, so please your smile. Okay, because I do not know in what page you are in. So please. Okay.
Mary Jane.
Yes,
MJ.
Mary Jane is there. And then next sheet. So this will be the last. Turn your cameras, please. Turn on. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So for our next speaker, wait. Okay. So for our next speaker, we have the executive, the editor of the BEL Journal, Professor Jovito Anito Jr. He is a research associate of the Jose Rizal University Research Office and an associate professor of the Jose Rizal Memorial State University. He is engaged in various projects funded by CHED and other international agencies, and a seasoned resource person, speaker, and mentor on research, and author of various articles of in Scopus Index journals. So let's welcome Professor Jovito Anito.
Thank you, Doc Ching. Good morning once again, everyone. I'm sorry I got a very unstable power and internet connection in my place this time. So I hope you bear with me if I got caught. If I got caught, Bill, save me. Okay, allow me to share my screen. Okay, and there. Minute. May I confirm if you are seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, we'll start. Um, the topic that I will be sharing, or the discussion that I'll be leading with you this morning, is on the conceptualization or the conceptualization of your research, but I am putting here conceptualizing in brackets the research report, because I want to emphasize in this presentation that when we start conceptualizing the research, we are also at the same time conceptualizing how we are going to write the research report. So it's going to be a general walkthrough of the entire research report. When we start thinking of the research, we look at how we are going to discuss or what types of data are we going to generate, how are we going to analyze the data, how are we going to discuss the data, and most of all, what's the impact of our research. So I'm going to chunk the presentation into two. One is on the one will focus on the social value or the public value of the research. I inserted this after Bill talked about the um, the deficiency in terms of sociological and critical analysis research in our region. I am integrating this in the presentation just so to give us some sort of guidelines in terms of how we are going to frame our research relative to the needs or the requirements of the government or the school, for example. We want to reiterate that again, this is not primarily just to let you write a research for publication in BEL journal. Okay, so we want to emphasize also that even if this study if your study was conceptualized through this meeting, you are free to publish it anywhere. Okay, so we are happy that we are here in this meeting to talk about the potential research that could be done relative to there. Wow. Okay. Power in our area got out again. I'm not sure if you can still hear me and you can still see my screen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, good.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I will continue without the video because it's very dark in our place now. Okay. Again, I'll be talking about the social impact of your research as part of the process of conceptualization. I'll be talking about the relevance of literature review in the process of conceptualizing our research. Okay, so I'd like to encourage you also to ask questions even during the presentation. You can raise your hand or you can butt in. As Bill said, nobody will be offended if you do that. Feel free to open a discussion even during the presentation. Okay, so again, I integrated this as part of this presentation just to highlight the impact of our research or the impact of the research that we are about to conceptualize together with the other participants in this meeting. We normally look at research in terms of its academic impact and the social impact, but researchers actually start to realize that at certain degree, fulfillment of one of these is will result to renunciation of the other. You can argue with me. Bill can elaborate on this, but at certain point, this is true. For example, in the Philippines, we get so focused about the academic or the scientific impact of our research. We tend to be too focused about the templates that our universities provide. We tend to focus about what matters or what merits points in our NBC, for example, or in promotion and ranking schemes in our universities. We tend to focus much on the academic impact of our research. We tend to renounce the social impact of our research. We tend to make research that will get the attention of the journals, but we tend to forget about the value of our research to our university, to our students, to our community, and to our country. So this is how I want to start this presentation, to look at the balance of the academic and the social impact of our research. So when we start to conceptualize research later, and when we form groups, I want to emphasize the academic impact of our research and the social impact of our research. Talking about the academic and the scientific impact, we've been trained on how to do that. We've been trained about how or what it is, about its standards, but perhaps we need more elaboration about the social impact of our research. So social impact, we're basically talking about the change in the behavior of the society, the persons or the people or the stakeholders are because or brought about by the research. Okay, so we can talk about the economic, the social, environmental, and the human rights impact of our research. Social impact talks about the changes in ways of life, changes in ways of life of our students, changes in ways of life of our co-teachers, changes in the manner our university administrators run the university, changes in our culture, changes in our perspectives, changes in our ideas, changes in terms of our political system, environment, health and well-being, personal and property rights, changes means also results to policies that produce improvements in the society. So we aim for these changes. We aim for the social impact. We aim for the social change in our research. So when we start conceptualizing our research later, we look at what's the value of our research, or how can our research result to change in the behavior, change in the understanding, change in the perception, change in the knowledge systems of the people involved. We aim for social impact apparently because research is nothing without any social value. We know that. We just tend to forget about that. We just tend to disregard that, but we know that research is nothing without any social value. And of course, we need to aim for social impact because research is investment. Whoever is funding our research, or even if the research fund comes from our own pocket, it's an investment. And anybody funding the research will always look for the evidence of usefulness of your research. I'm talking from the perspective of somebody who is into government projects or have been into government projects. They always look for the evidence of the usefulness of your research. So when we start conceptualizing research, we always look at what's the return of investment in this research? Investment in terms of human resources, investment in terms of money. What's the return of investment? Okay. In the case of DOST, they are looking for the 6 P's. When we talk about projects that they're going to fund, they're looking at publication, how many publications will be generated, or how many research articles will be generated. Will there be a patent or IP that will be generated from the study? Will there be products that will be invented or will be developed? What about services to people or group of people? Okay, are we going to provide training or are we going to provide something that could improve their knowledge base or their understanding? Are we going to link or forge linkages or partnerships? Are we going to influence policy in the government and in education, for example? CHED will also look at the beneficiaries of your research. Who are the beneficiaries? And in fact, they want to see the number of beneficiaries. How many specifically will benefit from your research? Okay, so these are the things that our government wants to see or wants to check on your research proposals, because this is their way of checking the evidence of usefulness of your research. Bottom line is we always look at the evidence of usefulness of our research. We look at how our research will be valued by the society, how our research will be valued by the community, okay, or by the country. Okay, so some of the key considerations in research. One is that your social improvement or the social change or the social impact must drive your research. So I'm saying this because there are many instances that it's the method of research that is driving our research. It means that we want to do research on this aspect because this is the method of research that I'm so familiar with. I cannot do research on this area because I'm not familiar with this method. It seems like method dictates the purpose of our research. Method dictates the goal of our research. I'm trying to reverse that and say that social improvement or the social impact or the social change must drive your research and must dictate the method of your research. Okay, so just to reverse the orientation of researchers when they engage or when they start to conceptualize research, especially when it's a collaborative research. I emphasize here critical reflection or critical analysis, just to echo the presentation of Bill a while ago. We need to look at some of the opportunities, some of the power structure, and see how we can locate our study in relative to these opportunities, power structure in the society, and how we analyze data relative to this, these opportunities. One of the things that we are encouraged to do is to perhaps align our research with some of the surrogate public values. For example, the international and the national research agenda. We have the SDGs. We have in the Philippines, we have the National Harmonized Research Agenda, DOST, and the many agencies of the USC, and of course your institutional research agenda if you're connected to a university or to an institution. For example, you can plot a matrix about the value of your research, or you can plot a matrix to just to appraise your research. Does your research align with some surrogate social values? Some surrogate social values are representative social values, not necessarily coming directly from the people, but it's the government's way of representing the voice of the people. Okay, so for example, in the Philippines, is your study aligned with the Philippine Development Plan? Is your study aligned with the Harmonized National Research and Development Agenda? Is your study aligned with the Higher Education Research Agenda, Regional Development Plan, or the Institutional Research Agenda? To ensure that there's value of your research, how do we locate our research? How do we locate our studied context relative to all these social values or preset social values? But I'm not saying that this is the core of everything, and we have to limit. We are not saying this to be limited with our research topics or research areas. But we're saying this to emphasize that we need to align ourselves with what is useful to the society, or what could provide impact to the society. And in this special issue of BEL, we are looking at studies that could help, number one, understand our flexible learning modalities, and of course, improve our practices of flexible learning or flexible learning. Perhaps we can look at the Philippine development goal. We have the Harmonized National Research and Development Agenda. We have the Higher Education Research Agenda. I do not know the last NERA is the NERA 2, which lasted until 2018. And for those who are into basic education, perhaps you can look at our basic education research agenda and some of the institutional research agenda. For example, you can ask, what does the university want to accomplish through your research? Or what themes must researchers focus on? Okay, so these are some of the considerations. Again, these are arbitrary, and you can treat this as your guide. For example, in exploring areas or in looking at areas to investigate in your research. Some of the dimensions of social impact, we look at the epistemological value to the discipline, value to the knowledge base, some social and institutional dimensions in terms of your institutional research agenda. How does your research impact your institutional research agenda? How does your research inform the ethics committee, the research committee, the evaluation committee? And how does your research impact the network of your university? Okay, or the reverse of that could be, how does your research agenda impact your research? How does the research committee could impact your research? And how does your research network or linkage impact your research? Another area or another dimension of social impact is on the things that you produce in your research. For example, the research instruments. You can look at the type of instrument that you use in your research. Maybe this instrument is something new, or your modification of the instrument may be useful to others also. The method, maybe you're introducing something new in the process of doing or in the process of investigation. Sometimes we tend to be too confined with the established procedures of how to analyze this data or how to go about data collection, for example, in this particular design of research. But it's not supposed to be like that. We are supposed to explore ways that, again, we want to see the social value as a driver of our research, not the methods. We can let methods, let methods align with the purpose of our research, not the other way around. So if we're introducing something new, for example, some of the divergence in the process of doing a qualitative study, then you introduce that, you write about that, tell the other scholars about the new method of investigating using this particular approach in research. Some of the guidelines, for example, training materials that you can develop that could help others. These are some of the dimensions of social impact. And of course, the spatial and geographical dimensions, who will benefit, how many will benefit, which areas will benefit from this in terms of the scope of the impact of your research. I talked about surrogate public values in the previous slides, and I'd like to emphasize that we can perhaps look at the value of our research using the public value mapping framework. We look at our study, our research in terms of the social goals and the public interest. How does our research align with the goals of the society, the goals of the public, the goals of the government, for example, or to be very specific, CHED has issued guidelines about how we are specifically going to conduct flexible learning. And so we want to do a study or do a research that could position our context relative to the guidelines of CHED or relative to the understanding of CHED with regard to the flexible learning system to inform CHED as well after our research. Some of the things that we generate or that would guide us in conceptualizing our research are the types or the characteristics of knowledge. There are based on the public value mapping framework, we can look at this into two aspects. One are the public values or the explicitly expressed public opinion polls, public statements, and some of the surrogate public values, some of the mission statements, vision statements, strategic plans, broad policies, statutes, some of the research gaps that we find in literature. Some of the institutional arrangements also, like what the linkages or the network needs, what the community needs, and some of the policy and political domains of knowledge production. Sorry. Power is back again. Okay, so how are studies conceptualized? I talked about the social value, but where do specifically we start when we conceptualize our studies? Again, when we talk about conceptualizing studies in this presentation, I'm talking about conceptualizing the entire research, not just the research proposal. I am even looking at conceptualizing or taking into consideration the journal where we want to publish or where we want to disseminate our results and the people that will be gathered or that will be linked to in the dissemination of our results. Studies could start from our research niche, what we have started, for example, or our research group, for example, our research interest, and in some cases, studies are conceptualized based on the focus of the grants. For example, we are given, there's a call for paper, for example, that focuses on this. That could be a springboard for the topic that we will study or investigate in research. I'd like to emphasize in the second part of the presentation the role of literature in the conceptualization of your research. Basically, we need to go back to literature. We need to go back to what has been established, what has been studied, what has been reported in the context that we want to investigate. So perhaps we can start with a very general topic or a broad topic to investigate. Then we look at or we read the literature or we read the existing studies about that particular topic. When we read literature, we always look for the balance analysis or balance appraisal of the literature. So we don't just look at things that could align with our original idea about the context that we are studying. We are even more encouraged to look at what contradicts our current understanding of the studied context or the topic. Okay, so literature, when we conduct literature analysis, we look at both the contradictions and the affirmations or the thesis and the antithesis of our topic. Then we let the literature guide us in framing the research problem, basically containing the theoretical and the conceptual frames, the relevance of our research, and the research questions. So, and we end this with the research question. But the research question can basically guide the entire research proposal or the entire research report later after you've done the research. In appraising the literature, we can use some thematic techniques. I know you are familiar with this. Looking at some of the clusters or group of ideas can be clustered, and naming that cluster into some of to a more encompassing concept, a concept that can represent all those items that you have clustered together, and then you do it in some conceptual hierarchy or some levels of conceptualization, starting from the very basic clusters, and then some of the organizing clusters, and some of the global themes. Your global theme could start as your main thesis of your research, or your main argument in your research, or the argument that you want to explore, to investigate in your research. Okay, so your organizing theme could become your global theme, which basically could become the general research objective, or the general research question of your proposal. Okay, so research questions are very crucial. As I have shown, research questions stem from research questions stem from our appraisal of the literature. Literature brings us to identifying the problem, the main focus of our research, which can be chunked into several research questions or some specific questions. Research questions guide our data collection. Research questions will tell us how or what type of data will be needed. And identifying the type of data will help us identify where specifically will the data be needed, or will the data be collected. And knowing the type of data and the source of data will lead us to the identification of the process of analyzing the data. How are we going to analyze the data? Okay, so that's basically how we see conceptualization, or how we see the conceptualization should advance from the literature review. Okay, so once we have identified these research questions, and when we start to conceptualize the research, as I've said, we can conceptualize the research as the research report in general. For example, we can plot in the form of a matrix all the research questions, the data that we identified to be collected to answer the research questions, and then the data analysis techniques, and then the expected results, or what are the results that we expect to generate in that data. Then we look at how we are going to discuss this data. So we go back to literature again. So when we talk about the discussion part of the report, it means that we are analyzing the current results vis-a-vis the existing results, or the existing data, or the existing reports. So it gives us the idea on what type of study, or what specific studies we are going to include in our literature review, just to prepare us in writing the discussion part. Okay. Discussion could also help us frame or write our conclusion. Basically, conclusion merges our results, the synthesis of the literature, and our concluding statement regarding that. My point in this presentation is that even at the stage of conceptualization, we are also looking at the potential conclusion, the potential recommendation that we may generate from the study. So when we write our proposal, when we conceptualize our study, we are basically conceptualizing the entire report. So yeah. Some of the tips or some of the things about literature review. These are review that are relevant to a particular issue, and in that case, the topic that we select. perhaps later during the workshop, the topic that we decide to work with other researchers or with other participants in this study. The purpose of literature, it contributes to understanding the research problem. We need to really understand what is studied, what has been known about our proposed topic or our research interest. Later, we will term that as a research interest. What is known? What is already known about the research interest? How is this topic or how is this idea related, or how is this research, the proposed topic or proposed research related to the work of others or the previous studies? How are we going to analyze or interpret prior research relative or using our current research, or how will our current research help us or give us a different interpretation or a separate interpretation of our existing research? What are the gaps of research that we need to investigate? Some of the conflicts of the ideas in the previous research, some of those contradicting ideas that we can resolve to also prevent duplication. Maybe working on something that has already been done or that has already been answered. Remember that we start with a very critical question in our investigation, and it may be something that has already been answered or has been exhausted in some other studies. Okay, so, and of course, finally, it's about locating our own research. Where do we locate our research in terms of what has already been known or what is already out there in the scholarly community or in the scientific community? Okay, so it is important to exhaust the literature or to do an yeah, intensive literature review in the process of conceptualization, our conceptualizing our research. Okay. How to be critical? Look at the author's credentials, the methodology used. I guess Bill talked about this or hinted about this in his presentation. Who were the authors? What were the process of arriving at those ideas or at those theses or conclusions? Is the author objective? Is the author persuasive? The value. Okay. And some tips in writing the literature. Always use evidence. Always argue with supporting evidence. So when we say something, couple it with an evidence, couple it with data, couple it with reference to a previous report. Be selective. Select only the essential. Use quotes sparingly. Summarize and synthesize. Paraphrasing doesn't solve the issue of high similarity index, and paraphrasing doesn't translate into synthesizing. Synthesizing is different. Keep your own voice. Manifest in your research. Do not hide yourself and do not hide your epistemology in your research. Make your own worldview, make your own paradigm visible in the research process, okay, or in the research. Use caution and paraphrasing. Idea must remain. I guess that's all that I can share about the social value and the relevance of literature in the process of conceptualizing your research. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite you for questions and for discussion points. I have shared this presentation in our group chat already. Thank you so much. I'll give you back to Doc Ching.
Okay, so the floor is now open for your questions, comments. Not only on the presentation of Jovi, but also of the presentation of Bill.
Yeah, I think
okay, we have
just focus on one of the
something
things
here.
that
Bias. Okay, here there is between reader and messages. There is a question from Sir Noel Blanco. How do we prevent bias from conceptualizing research?
Okay, bias. I have to understand the 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 nature of bias that Sir Noel is referring to. Bias in terms of bias in a sense of.
Well, you might want to.
Can I come into that a little bit? That's one of my favorite words. Look,
Okay, Bill.
let's not worry about too much about bias. Uh, we come to research with a particular perspective. We come with particular set of values and interests. So let's not assume that we are unbiased. All of us have certain understandings and so on, certain preferences. Uh, so let's not be too worried about that facade of objectivity. We are at a distance from what we are researching. We are like scientists that have no beliefs, no interests. Let's get over that. We have certain perspectives. Now, having said that, if I have a perspective, I just want to prove it to other people and pick and choose and all that kind of thing. It's not that I am biased is the problem. The problem is I'm not honest. So if we admit our perspective and reflect on it critically, say, okay, yeah, this is my belief, this is my perspective, but I'm willing to change. I'm willing to challenge that. And if I am honest in my research process, it's okay to argue for something that you believe in. So the problem is not the perspective that I start with, but the problem is being honest and critical in finding evidence and supporting or disproving what I believe. Now, the word bias has very negative connotation, and I don't want to say it is okay to be biased, but it is okay to have a perspective and be honest and critical about your perspective as well as the perspective of the other people. I write research that I believe is worth it. I use theories that I adhere to. So there is always something of Bill Atway in everything I do. But I hope that I'm critical and honest. That's what is important. This is
Okay,
my
so
take.
Bill, do we need some sort of a declaration of our perspective in our research, and how do we do that?
Okay. In qualitative research in particular, um, they encourage that. Okay, but there is no need to say, for example, I in social justice, I believe these people are oppressed. So we may not actually use the words I believe or my perspective is, but from the discussion, from the what I am arguing, it becomes clear that this is my point of view. These are the theories I'm gonna use.
Bill,
But yeah, go on.
that that might be perhaps applicable to those who are really used to discussing that wherein the self paradigm manifests in the discussion. But for some beginners, it may be difficult that they start or they dedicate a separate paragraph to express their their potential biases, or we call it the reflexivity statement.
Uh, yes, there was a comment. MJ, I think, made a comment, learning and unlearning and so on.
Mhm.
It might be difficult. in terms of how do you actually write it. But I think the important thing is understanding ourselves and understanding research. Yes, I think we all do it. We all do it, but we present the writing as if it is objective and unbiased, especially in quantitative research. We accept that we have to be objective and detached and so on. But in quantitative research as well, you choose the research questions, you choose the research area, you choose the interview questions, the test questions. So what is this thing, objectivity or unbiased? Where do these come from? Somebody decided they are important. So in any research, it is the indirectly saying what you believe in, and in your choices of the research questions, theoretical standards, you already are. So it's not a matter of writing it differently, but understanding it differently. That these choices that I made are based on my perception of what I think is important. Um, I want to hear a little bit more from you, Sir Jovi, about the difficulty. What is the difficulty in conceptualizing what we are doing or in actually writing it?
In more of in analyzing the data when we write
Okay,
in our
okay,
discussion,
okay,
sometimes
okay.
we get
Yeah,
lost
well, that's
about
important.
our identity as a
Yes,
scholar
yes,
in terms
yes,
of
yes.
our
Yeah.
yeah.
What I'm talking about is objectivity and uh, uh, subjectivity and perspective in the design of the study. When it comes to analysis of the data, I have to be credible. I have to show people that I am not just picking and choosing. Okay. If you give counter examples to what you're saying, that increases the credibility of what you are saying. So I'm saying, look, students enjoyed that or loved it, and so said this, and so said this, and so said that. But if I say, oh, look, there is one student here, he felt lost, he wanted guidance, he wanted control, then I believe you more. So the question is not objectivity. The question is credibility. So the criteria that qualitative researchers use is not bias and objectivity and all of it, but credibility. So I know you have a bias, but what I want you to show to me in your analysis is that you are credible, you are critical, and you're not lying to me by picking and choosing. And you can do that in the analysis by giving some examples, by limitations of what you're saying, counter examples. Then I trust you as credible. I may not share your bias. I may not believe your story.
Yeah.
But I respect you because you're convincing me that your story is credible.
Yeah. Bill, there is usually such a thing in the methodology where we have to tell the readers how we triangulated the data. So it's a particular process in the methodology, triangulation of the method itself and the triangulation of the data analysis.
Yeah.
So,
Now, that doesn't prove or disprove bias and perspective. What that does is increases the credibility of what I'm saying. So if I say to the people in the interview, they told me this, what I observed is this, and then in the interviews and all of that kind of thing, observations and documents and all that kind of thing, then I believe your story more. You are credible.
Okay. So it's more of a question of validity and credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Done
don't use the word validity at all.
Okay.
But the concept of credibility
Yeah.
is more in line with what I think, which some people call it validity. It has a different assumption about reality and so on. They're saying similar things.
Okay. So there is another comment here from Mom Gladys Escarlos. Are there styles to follow in presenting the literature? I think it is related to what Nenny Mariana said. Do you have any good tips to do matrix for building
For
state of
building
the art?
state of the art.
Yeah.
I normally present the literature using uh, the global theme. If you recall uh, the the figure I showed in my presentation, when we analyze the literature, I normally start with the specific literature or the specific concepts presented in the literature, the data, and then start to build it conceptually until I get to the global theme of the literature, which is basically the focus of my investigation. So when I start to present the literature now, I start from the global theme down to the specifics. Okay, so it's going up and then sliding down from when we write. So that's my style. I do not know of any. I don't want even to recommend, because style of writing will always be our own preference as a researcher. But by practice, I do that. I analyze or I write about what is generic or what is the general theme I have drawn from the literature I'm reviewing, and then look at or support it with some of the details of the literature. Okay, so because in a way that has already been my process of synthesizing the literature. So at certain point, I use quotes when I talk about the general theme, but very sparingly. Most of the time, it's a consolidation of the different ideas coming from different sources or coming from different studies. So very rarely that it's about paraphrasing a very certain study or a particular study, because it's basically a consolidation of so many. Your idea is a product of the ideas of so many other researchers who you happen to have, whom you happen to read as related to the proposed study. So you may find the figure helpful, read and then develop the general themes or consolidation of the different ideas and then write about. But in many cases, this literature review doesn't constitute a separate section in our manuscript or even in our proposal. It's basically integrated in the introduction part, wherein we can write about the topic that we are investigating, and then what has it been known, looking at the thesis and the antithesis and our own critical analysis or our analysis of the topic based on our experience, based on our, for example, some of the structures in the government or some of the structures in our system or in our community, and we write about it. Uh, you know, lead to the problem and then the problem to the questions.
Can I add to
Yeah,
Yes.
go
support
ahead,
that
Bill.
Yes.
completely and just add a little, well, say it in a slightly different way. One of the problems I find in a very badly written review of literature is when we take one author and say everything they said, then we move to another author,
Yeah.
say everything they said, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That is very jumpy, because this author may have a definition and condition and so on, and then another author may have another definition and so on and so forth. what would be useful is to focus on the themes, for example, definition of a concept, factors involved in it, problems involved in it, arise, whatever it is, those themes, and then say, this person says this person says that, and I say this, okay, and then move to another theme, like problems with, and then do the same thing, and so on and so forth. So the structure of your review of literature are the themes. Now,
Yeah.
where those themes come from, two places, what I have read, but also the research questions. So the research questions consist of the effect of this on that, and problems with this, and gender differences, and so on, then all of those themes that come up in the research questions and later in the methodology should be discussed in the review of literature. So if, for example, one of your research questions is gender, and you have not mentioned gender at all in the rationale and the literature, then it is not a well-structured review of literature or publication.
Okay, so yeah, Bill, so you are emphasizing at this point the importance of the alignment of the research, statement of the purpose or statement of the problem, review of literature, and the methodology.
Yeah, exactly. But these do not need to be in that sequence. Like,
Yeah.
I do this, and then I do this, and then I do that.
Yeah.
They are iterative. I start with research questions, then I started to look at the literature. And in the literature, I said, ooh, that's an interesting question. I go and modify them. I come in the design. I say, oh, it'd be nice to do that. Oh, but I haven't put it in my research questions. So I go and change them. So that at the end, there is this harmony that we're talking about. Yes, that's a
Bill,
good point.
um,
Yes.
that's very ideal, and I understand where you're coming from. But we experience problems regarding that in universities, for example, when universities impose very linear procedures when it comes to research. For example, there's this title defense, and once the title is approved, you cannot change the title. You cannot change the focus of your research, and no matter how different your direction would be after reading the literature, um, the the university will no longer allow that. So that becomes a problem. That becomes a dilemma among researchers.
Yeah.
That's based on
I
experience.
yeah, I have friends. This is being recorded, so I have to word it carefully. I have friends in many universities, and I don't want to step on toes. You're partly correct. That is probably a limitation of the university, but that goes only on the title. It doesn't go on the body of the thing. But the deans I talk to and the vice presidents of research and coordinators of higher degrees, they all assure me that if you really want to change, you can change. Bit more difficult, you have to write a letter or something, but you can change. It is possible to change. I do research in a very messy way, okay? I have a working title, okay? I start writing and then going back and forth
Right.
to assure that controversy. Then I publish from it. And that's experienced my students as well. The title is the last thing they write. Because in the writer, you want to choose a title corresponds to what you plan
Right.
to, but not only that, what you found. A lot of times what we find is not known
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
So yes, it is a bit uncomfortable, but I I don't know of any university that does not allow changes even though it is slightly complicated.
Another thing you might want to give comments to is the misconception. Is it misconception or flaw in the use of conceptual framework, research paradigm, and of course the theoretical framework. Would you like to comment on it, Bill and Jovi?
Well, I think probably in hindsight, maybe we should have discussed this as a separate topic because it is.
Okay.
Okay, look, I have recordings on conceptual framework. If people like lectures I gave, if people want it, they can request it. I can send you the links to those recordings.
Nastaran wants to say something. Nastaran,
Okay.
you may unmute.
Yeah.
Hello, yes. Hello,
He's
good
from
morning.
JRU.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello,
Hello.
Mr.
I am from Computer Engineering Department of JRU. I'm doing some research, and I'm also an advisor and panel for some of our groups who are defending their theses. I just want to add something regarding the review of related works. When we ask our students to propose, they have a title defense. Usually, they are required to have their chapter 1, chapter 2, which is RRL or review of related works, so they can come up with a solid work. However, in many cases, we allow them to change the objective, even the objective of their studies, if they come up with some somehow conclusion that this perspective of a study or this line of a study is better than the one which they previously proposed. So we will let our students this flexibility. They have this flexibility to write a letter to their panels and change part of their objectives, specific objectives. However, not changing the whole concept or the main objective of their study. As long as it's a specific objective, they are of course allowed to do that because that's the nature of research. That when we are doing it, when we are just continuing our research, we might come up with new ideas, we might change our direction of a study sometimes. So that's totally, I think, acceptable and understandable. So I just wanted to add and share what we do here.
Yeah,
Thank
can I
you,
make it?
Nas.
Can I
Yes.
make a comment about that, please?
Yes, yes,
May
Bill.
I? Okay. Now, those regulations and those procedures and those policies at universities stemmed from the traditional quantitative research, where you start with research questions, you lock them in, you cannot change them. Then you look at methodology as a way to answer those questions, okay? And then you analyze the data, and then you find conclusions about those. And that's a very rigid system. If, for example, you find something important, but does not relate to the research questions, you throw it away because it does not answer the research questions. And it was considered dishonest to change the research questions after you get the data. That was a big no-no. Now, I know about that because in my training for PhD, that's what used to be the case. You cannot change the research questions. However, after decades of qualitative research, we realize that research doesn't proceed that way. Everything is a working document until you submit it to the university and so on. Then it has to be consistent. But the process of writing and developing has nothing to do with the final form. The final form is how you present it. So yes, I'm aware of some of the policies of the universities. I question them, but then who am I? But within those structures, I think there's always a room for deviations, if you like. And I hope that universities would look at their expectations and approximate them to the real way in which people do the research. When students attempt to write questions, I said, forget it. Don't start here. Go and become very, very familiar with the literature, what the issues are, and then try to write research questions based on those issues, and then collect the data. And if the data says something else, change the research questions. Because the document that you're producing, whether it's a thesis or a paper, is self-cohesive one. And rather than say, oh, look, this is an important finding, but it doesn't fit my questions, well, change the questions to produce a cohesive paper or a cohesive article or thesis. Uh,
Bill, I just want to share one practice at De La Salle University Science Education Department, where due to the pandemic, there is a need to have some sort of revision in the methodology. So what we do is we propose a methodology, revision and methodology to the panel members. So we come together once more, present the changes we have to make, and then get their approval. So it's quite flexible, especially due to the crisis that we are in right now.
correct me if I'm, that's good to know, and I think I'm aware of that. If the changes are minor,
Yeah.
is it enough to deal with that on email between the faculty, and if everybody agrees, it goes?
Yeah.
So there is no need.
In one case, what we did was we tried to talk with the chairman of the panel and whoever is available, and then we noted down all the suggestions and then sent those suggestions to the other members of the panel by email, via email.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit easier than calling a meeting. Now, if it's the major changes of topics, well, that's okay then. But you know, tinkering with research questions and review of literature, these are considered minor, and they could be done by just informing people about it and getting their approval.
Yeah. And it became a good practice because the mentoring is done not only by the mentor, but by the panel members as well. So, I think it's a very good collaborative effort among the mentors to help the mentee in the conduct of the research.
Nini asked for an example of published paper. Yeah, just look at any published paper in a good, respectable journal, and it would have those, depending on the topic that you have. And then look at that paper from a reputable journal and ask yourself, is the literature review consistent with the research questions and consistent with the methodology as well? And most good, respectable journals, that will be the case. Because that is something that reviewers look for. So, yeah, any good published paper would have those.
And then